Hi, everybody. Welcome to the September Make for All community call. My name is Steph Santoso, and I'm the Director of Maker Initiatives at Citizen Schools and the lead for the Make for All initiative. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to join these calls yet, these calls are really designed to give commitment makers an opportunity to share more about their work and provide asks for help and offers for help based on the resources and expertise that they have, and really to kind of build community across the organizations and institutions that are really focused on expanding access to maker-centered learning around the country. So we're really excited to have you all join us today. And also really looking forward to some great conversations later in this call and then this webinar. So for organizations who haven't made commitments to support maker-centered learning, these calls are a great opportunity to learn more about what innovative work is happening in this area all across the US. And you know, your organization might make a connection that leads to collaborating or supporting one of these commitment makers through one of these calls. That's one of our hopes. Or maybe you'll be inspired to develop a new or expanded initiative focused on maker-centered learning within your organization and within your community moving forward. So I just wanted to briefly go over the agenda for today's call. So we'll begin by hearing about some really innovative work from several different commitment-making organizations. So joining us today, we have colleagues from Columbia Gorge STEM Hub in the Dalles, Oregon. We have colleagues joining us from Digital Promise, as well as Hamilton County Schools and the Public Education Foundation and the Greater Chattanooga, Tennessee area. And we also have colleagues joining us from Maker Ed. And then we'll transition to hearing from Bob Russell, who's the Program Director for Education and Human Resources at the National Science Foundation. And Bob's just been a wonderful supporter of STEM education and maker-centered learning through his role at NSF. And so he'll talk a little bit more about NSF and its rich history of supporting research and development in this space and in other related fields. To make sure that we have plenty of time for all of our speakers to share their work, we're gonna just ask that you hold your questions until the last half of the call, but please you know, take note of them. We'll have an opportunity during the last half for you all to ask questions. You can ask questions from the presenters, and presenters would encourage you all to ask questions of each other as well as others that are on the call. And my colleague Megan is actually also here with me, and she'll be helping to make sure that presenters are able to share their slides and drive them, and then we'll help to facilitate the Q&A and discussion towards the end of the call. So let's go ahead and get started. And I just wanted to invite Christy, Christopher, and Jacob Field from Columbia Gorge STEM Hub to kick us off. Christy and Jacob, are you all there?
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, excellent. I no longer can see the slides, so am I supposed to show my screen for this?
Oh, there's a little bit of like feedback on your end, Christy. It's a little bit it's kind of hard to hear you now. It was better before.
Okay, well, I was just asking, can you show the slides, or do I need to show my screen and pull them up?
You can share your screen. You're fading in and out, but you can either share your screen, or I'm happy to drive your slides for you.
Okay, why don't you pull them up, because I think that'll be faster.
Sure.
I can just see. We'll see which is faster.
And you sound great now.
Okay, yeah, I'm not changing anything. Sometimes our Wi-Fi is not fantastic.
And then Megan, if you wouldn't mind just making me the presenter. Oh, actually, now Christy now you have your slides.
There we go. All right. Okay, so I know we have 7 minutes, so please let me know if I end up going over time, or cut me off. The Columbia Gorge STEM Hub is in a rural part of Oregon, in Northern Oregon, just to give you a little bit of background. And so in designing our curriculum, we take into account where we are. Let's see here. Okay, so the goal of the work that we're going to talk about today was about, broadly expanding maker access to more youth in our community. We have a pretty good presence of different programs here when you take into account, the fact that we're rural and low, small populations, small towns. But there are a lot of kind of the stereotypes that happen in STEM here. Participation in STEM opportunities tend to be dominated by white male youth, especially in the DAOs. And so in what we want to do, we wanted to really expand that access. Make something that was appealing to girls and people of color, that they didn't think that, oh, STEM is just for boys and making is just for boys. So you can kind of see that those points in our goals here. And then with, any making initiative, we also really wanted to kind of work on the 21st century skills of problem solving and creative thinking. And also with making comes up learning to persevere through mistakes. And we couldn't find anything that fit the need that we had here, which was that we wanted something that would be able to go throughout a whole year, something where you wouldn't have to identify as a tech person or a maker yourself to be able to lead the experiences for the youth. You would need to be able to facilitate, a classroom. You need to have some classroom management skills, but if you had the interest, you could lead the sessions. And so we were very intentional as we were developing this solution to meet that. We don't have a lot of staffing that can be dedicated to after school programs around STEM, so it really had to be something that anyone who is interested could do. So, like I said, we really couldn't find anything that was what we needed to just, we couldn't go purchase it. So we created our own. And I don't know if Jacob, you want to jump in, because so Jacob is a college student who's in a work study position. And he actually did really the majority of the work in developing the curriculum with, of course, assistance from me, Christy, the STEM Hub director. I taught high school math for several years, so I have the teaching experience, but he was really the one putting in most of the time, and also testing all these activities with young makers. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll just give a short overview of the curriculum. Like Christy's points say here, we ended up with a year-long curriculum with once a week after school sessions lasting about an hour long. And the curriculum is designed so that anyone who's interested in doing it and has had, even a little bit of experience managing a classroom can do it. It uses basic supplies in a simple supply kit that we provide for the entire year to the locations in our area, and low-cost supplies. And the kids go through a lot of different activities involving making electronics and engineering and all sorts of different things, some creativity, some a little bit more, really just a broad range of making style activities. So.
And we did end up organizing it into unifying units. So there are certain themes around different projects, and spent quite a bit of time researching what are the different units that are going to make sense here, that are going to teach, engineering, design skills, that are going to connect with what kids in our region already see. So there's certain things like we wouldn't probably have public transit as any sort of topic because no kids in the Gorge use public transit. It doesn't exist here. But they do see windsurfing sails and they see barges. So we, really took those ideas into account in designing the curriculum. And we also tried to cover sort of different common themes in the making movement. For instance, I was a little nervous about including 3D CAD design because of, you need computers for everyone, but we felt like that was an important unit to cover if we're really going to give them a thorough introduction to making. Also just to kind of touch on some challenges. So we piloted this last year, and we're going into our second year with a more thorough, expanded curriculum. So some challenges, just I guess to mention a few. One is that we said to the makers, we want to celebrate failure and learn from failure, you know, and improve from that. But then we'd have all these activities where they only had an hour to do it and not a chance to try it again. So we took that into account in the redesign, where they have more opportunities on a second day to get a chance to redesign their tower or redesign their boat and make it better. We also tried various formats and really found that the best format, sort of as we predicted, was in the after school setting, where you have the same group of kids every week, you know, with the exception of absences. So the curriculum is now available on our website. We have it in two parts. We have the actual curriculum with lesson plans, and then we have a maker notebook, which has all of the different handouts that support the lessons for the makers. And then our offer and request. So the offer is the curriculum. It's a share-alike license, so that, you know, you can use it. You don't have to purchase it from us. But that leads into our help question, which is, how can we try to track who's using this beyond our own region, such as having some sort of download tool, and then any ideas the group may have on generating some funds from this to help support our own sustainability of this program, because we do like to provide the supplies to our clubs to make it more feasible. And I think that's about time, so I'll stop there. Oops.
Thanks so much, Christy and Jacob. This is super helpful, and I'll definitely bring up those two questions that you have in the discussion section, so that we can kind of put our heads together with the group and see if we can get some ideas from you on how to track who's using the great curriculum that you guys have developed, and as well as funding opportunities for sustainability. You're welcome. Thanks for sharing. So right now, I wanted to introduce Nick Schiner, who's the Learning Experience Manager at Digital Promise. And Nick will be talking a little bit more about an exciting framework that that communities can really leverage to help with expanding the work that they're doing around maker education. Nick, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, absolutely. How is everybody? Just want to make sure that you can see my main screen. Does it say grow maker learning programs in your school?
Yep, and we can hear you perfectly.
Great, thank you. So my name's Nick Schiner. Like I said before, I'm the Learning Experience Manager for Digital Promise. The majority of my work is focused on experiences working with administrators and educators to help create sustainable, equitable, and inclusive, powerful learning experiences, specifically through maker learning. I joined Digital Promise about a year ago. Prior to my role here, I was with Baltimore County Public Schools, just outside of Baltimore, Maryland, heading up our maker movement, taking care of the maker spaces in all of our 175 school centers and programs, working to help support those schools, getting them equipment, creating a lending library, and building a mobile innovation lab, which served as a mobile maker space that traveled between all of our elementary schools. When I joined Digital Promise, one of the first things that I started working on was taking a look at our Maker Learning Leadership Framework, which has existed for a few years now, and thinking about how we could streamline access to the content that we have, create new content, and put not just our best content forward, but also the content that belongs to many of our partners in this work and other thought partners and thought leaders in the maker space, no pun intended. So you can see the link here, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to hop in for a live demo in just a moment. This is our vanity link to get you there nice and easily. It's digitalpromise.org/makerframework. Pop back. There we go. So one of the things that we really wanted to make sure that we were doing with the Maker Learning Leadership Framework was getting people started with where they needed to start. A lot of times this can be really cumbersome for folks and really intimidating, so we wanted to chart a path for people as they navigated the work of starting or growing a maker learning program. So you'll see right when you get started, we've got 3 links right there for you. One that explains what maker learning is and is tied to our principles of powerful learning that we use internally and increasingly externally as Digital Promise. The next, you'll find a section on establishing your vision. And what I hope you'll notice here is that much of our content is either generated internally by us through work that we do with our partners or the cohorts that we run, but also work that you'll see from some amazing thought leaders in this space as well. So you'll see I know we've got some Maker Ed folks on the call now. So we've got the Maker Ed value mapping grid, the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh's vision statement tool. Autodesk has a really cool learner journey worksheet that kind of puts to the forefront what the student experience should look like, sound like, and be. So you'll see we really pull in content that we feel like it's not really important to recreate the wheel, and we link to that and we link it out externally. And then last but not least, in this where to start section, we have the Maker Learning Maturity Matrix. This is one tool that we've had in existence for a couple of years now, but just recently relaunched this as well. You'll see it's divided into 3 main sections. We really take a look at building support systems, getting your administration, your faculty and staff, and your community all bought into the Maker movement and supporting Maker learning in the building and out in the community as well. Teaching and learning. So what are the different pedagogies and practices that are related to Maker learning, and what do they look like in your learning environment? What does curricular integration of Maker learning look like? And then also, how can you make to assess and also assess making? In this 3rd section, we cover acquisition and allocation. So we take a look at funding and budget. So how do you get grant funds? How do you repurpose funds that are already existing in a budget now? And what kind of movement is happening in your building at that time as it relates to funding and budgets? Then taking a look at space, whether it's you have a dedicated space and you want to revamp it, you're looking at to create a dedicated space, or you have to get creative and spread things out around the building and have mobile solutions. We want you to be able to assess where you are along those lines. And then the last one is tools. What types of tools do you have? And again, not necessarily the fact that, oh, we have expensive tools, that means we've embedded tool acquisition and allocation within our school or in our learning environment. But really, like, do we have a broad range and are teachers comfortable? That's something that we really look at. So people using this can assess where they are on this maturity matrix. We really encourage this self-assessment and self-reflection. And then from there, they can go into those 9 subsections that we have laid out here. So I'll hop into community just to give you a sense of what that would look like. You'll see that we repeat the matrix here, that particular line, so you can kind of reassess where you are as you're continuing to use some of these resources. You'll see that we have links to both Digital Promise content as well, again, as other content. So for example, Press, the nice thing is that everything opens in a new window. So here we have tips and tricks for how to get the community involved and share your content with the media. One last thing that I really wanted to point your attention to, done the work of embedding micro-credentials that are offered in tandem with Maker Ed. So you'll see if I go into the space section, you'll see down at the bottom of each section, we'll have anywhere where there's an opportunity. So for example, this one is designing a space for making. When you select that, it takes you to our micro-credentials page for the description of that micro-credential, how to apply, and the work that you would need to do. So I guess my offer and my ask are kind of the same thing. My offer is, please use this, use it in good health, in good making, and if there's anything on these pages that you find helpful, we're really glad to be able to kind of collate and create a place and one-stop shop for you to find all of this amazing content. And then the ask is the same. If you think as you're going through it that you see anything or can think of anything that maybe we're missing from any of these sections, please let us know. We're constantly growing. We're in the middle. This is version 2.0 of the framework. We're in the process of beta testing 2.1 right now. We're adding a little bit of a roadmap feel to it, with a little bit more context around each of the resources. But if there's any resources that you think would be especially helpful, if you have questions about anything, please don't hesitate to let us know. We're always looking for more contributors and more people to add to this incredible resource that we love to offer to everybody in the maker sphere. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Nick. And I love the idea. Sometimes I think when you think of frameworks, like more traditionally, you think of them as being kind of static, like they get developed and then that's the framework. And obviously, maker education and maker-centered learning continues to evolve, and more institutions and schools and organizations are adopting this kind of learning. And so I love the idea that you're creating obviously multiple versions, and this is a live, organic framework that continues to evolve as opposed to just being something static. That's great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I wanted to introduce some of our Chattanooga area colleagues. So we have Michael Stone, who's the Director of Innovative Learning at the Public Education Foundation, joining us, as well as Grant Knowles, who's the Innovation Coordinator from Hamilton County Schools. He'll be talking a little bit more. Both Michael and Grant will be sharing some of the great work that they've been doing in the greater Chattanooga area, district-wide, around digital fabrication education. Michael and Grant, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourselves and get started. Okay, we can see your screen, which is great. I think we're having a little trouble hearing you.
Oh, can you hear us now?
Yes, we can hear you. You're a little faint.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
How's that?
Still a little faint.
Wow.
Oh no, you guys sound like you're underwater.
I don't know what else to do. Let's see here.
Oh, that's a little bit better. Can you keep talking?
Did that help?
Yes.
There we go. Okay, great. Sorry about that. So I'm Michael Stone. I work with the Public Ed Foundation here in Chattanooga. It's a local nonprofit, joined by Grant Knowles.
Hey, so this is Grant Knowles. I'm from Hamilton County Schools here in Chattanooga and Hamilton County wrapped around side, and working in the new Office of Innovation and Choice as the Innovation Coordinator. So thank you for the opportunity to share. We're really excited about some work that's been going on in Chattanooga for the last couple of years now. We're into sort of a 2 or 3 year journey, or 2 or 3 years into a lengthy journey, developing what's sort of emerging locally as a digital fabrication ecosystem. We started back in, I hope you can still see the screen. We started back in 2014. STEM School Chattanooga, which is a local magnet school, opened the first Fab Lab in the state. And it was transformative in terms of what they were doing. They had a really interesting model where they opened the lab, where no students were assigned to go to the lab. They had no classes there, and instead the lab worked directly with content teachers. The lab teacher worked with content teachers to develop interdisciplinary project-based learning units that leveraged access to tools in a fab lab, digital fabrication tools, so that it was seamlessly blended such that students were able to change how they engaged and how they experienced content, while also elevating. They talk a lot about process skills, or people call them 21st century skills, sort of thinking about how do you make, we all say critical thinking matters or collaboration matters. They started articulating what that really looks like and how do you get better at those process skills over a 4 or 5 or 6 year continuum. And they used the Fab Lab as the mechanism to start driving that. Well, fast forward to 2017, the Fab Foundation identified that lab at STEM School Chattanooga as one of 2 model labs for how to effectively integrate Fab Labs and digital fabrication into a school experience for high school students, middle school, high school students. And concurrently with that, in January of 2017, Volkswagen, working in partnership with the state of Tennessee, made $1 million investment through my organization, through PEF, to open 16 Fab Labs. They call them Volkswagen E-Labs in 8 middle schools and 8 high schools in Hamilton County School District. And then you can see we're going to talk a little bit, Grant's going to talk a little bit at the end of this presentation about what we see coming down the pike. We have active plans to open this Global Center for Digital Innovation here locally, which represents a really interesting sort of new venture for our community. So I wanted to share a little bit about the Volkswagen E-Lab experience. I led that work for the Public Education Foundation, continue to lead that work. And what we're really excited about by having 16 plus the lab at STEM School, 17 labs, it's the largest concentration of digital fabrication labs, or specifically Fab Labs, in educational Fab Labs in the world. But having a bunch of labs doesn't really matter. What we're really interested in is what's happening there. So we've worked with the Fab Foundation. Sherry and her team have been actively involved in some of our work. And Sherry's actually coming in tomorrow for a press event to make this announcement. And what she has helped us articulate, and what a number of visitors, we've had over 5,000 visits from educators across the country in the last 3 years to come by and see the labs, interact with the students in the labs. What we're most excited about and certainly most proud about is that what's happening in these labs is far more important than the stuff that's in them. The stuff just enhances what's possible. So I thought I'd speak real briefly to, as we were opening these labs, what we did, we looked for really good teachers, not necessarily tech experts, but teachers who showed a propensity for having an open mind, for being, having a group mindset and having the capacity to really innovate and drive forward. So we provided 120 hours of initial PD for those teachers in the summer, plus 3 years of ongoing support. And that PD was almost exclusively non-technical. It was a heavy focus on pedagogy and philosophy. And what we were trying to do was model a belief that we have at the PEF and the Hamilton County Schools, that process was more important than product, that you could use these tools to create engaging experiences for students that elevated how they engage with content in such a way that we truly valued process, such that we assessed process on even footing as final product, maybe even ahead of final product, as we tried to spur for innovation. So as we look to move forward, the district is continuing to invest in STEAM labs in elementary school. And as we start to talk about this language of a digital fabrication ecosystem locally, we have the Fab Labs in our middle schools and high schools. About half of them are fully outfitted now. We're looking to expand that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Grant to talk about a really interesting new venture, this digital center for, Global Center for Digital Innovation, that really helps sort of target this and create a capstone experience for students.
So this is Grant Knowles from Hamilton County Schools. I'm jumping on. So I've had the opportunity to serve as a specialist in one of the VWE labs the last couple of years, and the impact has spread enough that a new department has been opened up at the central office, the Office of Innovation and Choice, and a big part of that is helping supporting the spreading impact and sharing kind of the why of the labs across the district. I think it's very easy for people to come in and see the what and even kind of see the tools and the how, but what's been really important for us is spreading the why, seeing that impact. And so kind of thinking about next steps, how do we support all learners, students, teachers, community? How do we continue to grow the human capital and keep the focus on product? For us, one of the things that we're working to do is to build this global lab that's going to be kind of right in between local, so Chat States and the STEM school here in Chattanooga. That's going to be kind of a launch pad for the education of students, teachers, and community as we continue to build this ecosystem and this framework. We have a lot of community members, community partners that are looking to have a workforce pipeline to be able to better connect with students and kind of help. And they're looking a lot in the kind of 11th and 12th grade area. And so what Michael and I have been working to do is how do we build a ramp? How do we build an equitable ramp to get any student, regardless of zip code, regardless of wherever they're at in the community, to have equal exposure and opportunity and engagement, even at a pre-K and kindergarten level, that allows them to grow in the process skills. We're looking for all students to kind of be stakeholders in that as we continue to grow out. So we've got 79 schools in the district. And it's our goal as a district to be able to spread that across all schools. We're really focusing on providing entrepreneurship opportunities, real authentic work experiences, so that we're not just preparing students to be future ready, but we're truly driving for students to be now ready. And to really focus on the design thinking mindset of designing with rather than for. So really kind of building those out with students. So our goal is to have this complete pipeline, this kindergarten through 14 digital fabrication pathway. And that's something that we're building out, focused on being tenant-based and process-based to be drivers of the content. So rather than just being another thing to do with the content and another thing to kind of make, really to have making be a driving force for the connection of schools and community. All right, so we wanted to kind of cut. You'll hear, I think you heard our timer go off there at the 7 minutes. We're happy to continue the conversation with anybody who has it, but wanted to also kind of honor that 7 minutes time there.
Thanks so much, Michael and Grant. And this is really, really exciting. And congratulations on all that you've accomplished up to this point. And the Global Center for Digital Innovation sounds like a really natural next step for the work that you've been doing district-wide. In terms of also, it sounds like part of it will be around enabling other communities in the region and potentially outside of the region and maybe even across the country to leverage some of the best practices and models that you all have developed already. So for folks who have questions for Grant and Michael, please feel free to save those. We'll have plenty of time to address them towards the latter half of the call. Right now, I wanted to introduce Lauren Penney, who is the Making Spaces Program Manager at Maker Ed, and she's actually going to be talking about the Making Spaces program and opportunities for your community to get involved there. So welcome, Lauren.
Thanks, and thanks for having me join. Is there an echo?
Nope, you sound really clear and we can see your slides as well.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. So the main thing that I'm going to talk about right now is the Making Spaces program, but before I started, I wanted to just talk about Maker Ed. So Maker Ed, really we do a lot of education support around making. Most of that is through in-person experiences. We also have an online repository of a bunch of resources and materials to help support folks, but then we also do in-person workshops and trainings. We're holding the Maker Ed convening later in October 11th and 12th in Pittsburgh with our partners, the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh. And then the main program that I'm going to talk about is Making Spaces, which is a 30-month engagement with different educational organizations to help support and grow maker-based learning experiences in their regional communities. And one of the reasons that this program came out of was a need that was seen in communities to help support maker-centered learning experiences, to help folks who are really interested in providing those experiences but didn't know how to get started, to connect those to local folks who are doing this already. So this is a partnership between the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh and Maker Ed, who lead this effort, along with the educational organizations that are the hubs doing this work throughout the country. And really, we know that it starts with maker-based learning experiences, and we know that you can have the tools, you can have the space, you can have the activities, but what really comes down to is professional development and building that capacity through professional development, and then also sustaining the work over time through community engagement. And so really what Making Spaces is designed is to provide the resources through professional development and support those organizations doing that work. So again, this comes down to supporting organizations interested. A lot of these organizations are schools, and then those schools and those sites are supported through a regional hub in their local network. Those regional hubs support from 5 to 10 schools or sites. And then we have the national network Typically in a cohort, we work with 5 to 10 organizations who are the regional hubs and provide support and resources to those folks so they can provide that support to the schools that are really interested in developing their maker-centered learning experiences. And so these hubs are people like museums and libraries and educational institutions and community centers, people who are really interested in doing this work. These are our current partners. We've done this for the past 3 years, and we've onboarded a cohort every year. You can see this distribution nationally in this graphic. The pink is cohort 1, the yellow is cohort 2, and the green teal color is cohort 3. And you can also access this online. So these are the hubs, and then each hub implements very differently in their communities based on what is needed in their communities and what the region is really looking for. So you can see out in California, we have a couple of folks in the Bay Area who are doing things relatively locally within their school districts. And then in Idaho, the hub there was actually working nationally, or not nationally, statewide across the whole state of Idaho in rural communities spread throughout. And so really it depends on how the organization is interested in working with their community and what that region means. But all in all, the organizations that we work with then support maker-centered learning in their regions. So I'm kind of going to breeze through this, but this is the support that we provide. So we do this at the network level, and then we support the hubs to do site selection, and then they work with their schools and their sites to do some visioning and then implementation. And the school, it's over 2 years because to change educator practice takes quite a long time and to really, this all starts with the visioning process. So what do you want from your maker-centered learning experience, and how can you develop that out? And so what we've seen as outcomes with this, that really to create sustainability, you have to build culture, which means having a shared language, having values, having a vision for supporting maker-centered learning in your region, in your location, whether that's your site or whether that's larger than the educational institution that you work with. And then shifting pedagogy, providing support for folks to implement maker-centered learning. What does that mean? How do you support it? How do you deepen those experiences? And then what does that look like in your community, and trying to build both leadership and legitimacy within your own organization, within the region, and building a community of support across local as well as national levels. And so that's really what this work is all about. And so my ask for this group is, if you know of anybody who might be interested in doing this work, please have them get in touch with me. There are more details on the website, but that's, and our applications for cohort 4 are open until the end of October. So that is that, and thank you.
Thanks so much, Lauren. So right now we're going to shift gears, and we're going to hear from Bob Russell, who's the program director for education and human resources at the National Science Foundation, which is really a federal agency that's really over a number of years really been supporting maker-centered learning in different ways. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Bob. Welcome, Bob. We can see your screen, but we can't quite hear you.
Okay, how about now?
Oh, perfect. We can hear you perfectly.
Well, I have the unusual job of helping figure out who gets the money, and so I don't actually have to do the work. I just play a role in the process of what proposals are ultimately funded. As you may know, the NSF is a federal agency. It's an independent federal agency, and as federal agencies go, it's relatively small. And I don't know why, but my slides aren't forwarding. But anyway.
I can advance your slides on my end, Megan, if you just want to make me a presenter, and just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Okay. Yeah, you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, well, so I said, as by federal standards, it's a relatively small agency. $7.5 to $8 billion. Was started after World War II when the federal government recognized the value of science. Well, for one reason, value for defense, and this was right after World War II, and you know, the federal government had supported the development of the atomic bomb, so that's not such a great thing to talk about. But on the other hand, the federal government recognized the importance of science, both just for basic research, understanding the universe, etc., but also, you know, supporting economic development. So that's in a nutshell what the rationale for the start of the National Science Foundation was. And from the get-go, it's funded science education both in the classroom and outside the classroom. And a big push for that came when the Soviet Union set up the Sputnik in 1957. So NSF has been a significant funder. Well, before that, it funded some projects, but it's been a significant funder since then. So just to point out in general, NSF funds pretty much all scientific disciplines with the exception of the areas of health research that the National Institutes of Health funded. So about 24% of all federally funded basic research comes from NSF. And as a result of research grants, NSF supported researchers have won over 200 Nobel Prizes, and I won't go through some of the really cool things in your cell phone or Google or whatever that have been in part a result from research that was initially supported by NSF. Go to the next slide. So within the area of, well, this is the overall core values of NSF. The first and premier core value is scientific excellence. And, you know, part of that is to operate as an excellent organization, and then with regard to STEM learning, inclusiveness, and that is to say, providing all people with with full access to learn science and to take part in science, and also to receive an education if that's their interest, to pursue vocations related to. When I'm saying science, I guess the current acronym is STEM, so I guess I'll go to STEM. Okay, go to the next slide. So NSF is organized into several directorates, you know, and they're organized by scientific discipline. So there's like biology and physics and mathematics and so forth. And one of the directorates is the Directorate for Education on Human Resources, and that's where where most of the support for STEM education comes from. Some of the other directorates fund small education programs from time to time, but most of the funding for STEM education directly comes from the EHR Directorate. And so the mission of EHR reflects the mission of NSF overall, ultimately having a well-informed citizenry that has access to the ideas and tools of science, and then at the same time taking a major role in preparing a workforce of scientists, engineers, and technicians who can support the science research enterprise in the United States. So next slide. So let's just show, you know, so the EHR Directorate is organized into 4 divisions: graduate education, undergraduate. Those 2 support graduate and undergraduate education, and there are a number of grant programs within each. I'm going to focus primarily on the division of research on learning in informal and formal settings, since I think that that's probably the one that's most relevant for most of the people on the call here. And finally, there's a division of human resource development that supports historically Black colleges and universities, tribal colleges, and other efforts to support the participation of underrepresented populations in STEM, although that's an emphasis across all the directorates, and including the programs that I'll briefly mention in the Division of Research on Learning. So next slide, please. So these are the broad themes of the investments that EHR makes. One is to develop programs and to research learning and learning environments, and clearly maker education is a pedagogy, and it's also a particular learning environment. So NSF is very interested in developing new approaches to engage people, students in the classroom, as well as the general public in learning, and Maker has shown a great ability to engage people in developing motivation, interest, learning skills, and so forth. So clearly that's highly relevant for NSF, and you could talk about Maker pedagogy, and maybe you would consider that the learning aspect, and Maker spaces could also be considered a learning environment. So Maker is highly relevant there. Secondly, broadening participation, that refers to engaging diverse populations in STEM, whether that would be ethnic, racial minorities, girls, persons with disabilities, LGBTQ, etc. So that's a very important objective across all of the EHR programs. And I know that many maker spaces are working hard to develop program abilities and to understand how to most effectively engage various diverse populations. It's a major challenge because, well, as everybody's probably aware, on the cover of Make magazine, until that went out of publication, about 80 or 90% of the people on the front page were, you can't see me, but I'm another white male. So there you go. Finally, another emphasis in EHR is STEM workforce, developing the STEM workforce. And of course, Maker education is highly relevant for that because, first of all, Maker spaces can engage people engage people. That's an excellent start. And depending on what you're doing, many of the skills that you would develop in learning how to use the various technology in maker spaces, they're highly relevant for many of the STEM professions across the board, as well as many of the skills, computational thinking, learning math within a maker context, etc. So what maker spaces do is highly relevant to NSF. So now I'll just very briefly mention several programs that fund research and development projects in maker spaces. So next slide, please. Well, there's the division. Okay, and then next slide. And okay, I'm going to go over these four programs quickly. So the next slide. Okay, so iTest supports programs that encourage kids to pursue STEM careers. And really, if you have a program anywhere from pre-K through senior and high school, you can apply to iTest. These are programs that have to directly serve students, but these programs also have to have a significant research component so that what NSF is investing in is not merely directly serving students, but it's to create new knowledge about how to engage participants in STEM and understanding how and why that works. So iTest focuses on, as I said, it focuses on STEM careers, and you can have an early stage project where you're kind of experimenting to figure out what works and what doesn't work before you're ready for a larger project. There's a project where if you have a very clear concept that's backed up by the available evidence, research, and practice, and you have a plan to build on that and to develop a new program, there's a category for that. And finally, if you have a program where you have evidence that it's been effective and you want to, let's say, expand it to additional sites and learn about that process, there's a category for that. And so the amounts of the grants range from several $100,000 up to $2.5 million. So there's one program option, and a number of maker spaces have been funded by this program. Next slide. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the next one is Advancing Informal STEM Learning. The acronym is Hazel. And that program funds anything outside the classroom that relates to STEM. So that can be making and tinkering spaces in museums, maker programs that aren't a direct part of the school curriculum. So here again, if you have an innovative approach and you have a good research and development process to determine if your innovative maker approach is, if you can identify evidence that shows that it works, or on the other hand, if let's say you have a program that seems to be very effective and you want to research what's going on, you can also propose a project along those lines. Most projects across all these programs involve an educational researcher or a learning scientist who could help you help you shape the design of your program, and can also help you develop the evaluation research plans, which are a required part of proposals. Okay, next slide. STEM plus C, this program looks at integrating computational thinking processes into a STEM discipline, into biology, physics, engineering, etc. So if you have computational thinking as an integral part of, let's say, design thinking in your makerspace, this might be a program that you'd want to look at. And these programs can occur inside the classroom or outside the classroom. And then this is an unusual program in that NSF doesn't preset the amount of the request that you can make to the program. So that's, you can ask for, theoretically you can ask for lots of money. I don't advise trying to max out, but anyway, if you have computational thinking that's an integral part of your program, you may want to check this one out. And next slide. Okay, Discovery Research Pre-K to 12. This funds programs in the classroom context, and they focus around one of three themes: learning, teaching, or assessment. So if your program involves developing specific activities that have a maker pedagogy underlying them to be used in the classroom, well, then you would want to submit to the learning strand. And if you're trying to provide teacher professional development, it would be the teaching strand. And then finally, if you're trying to develop assessment methodologies to assess the learning and skill development that occur in a makerspace, well, that would be the strand. And the amounts of funding range from several $100,000 up to $5 million, depending upon what you're doing. So final slide. I think it's the final slide. There you go. So if you're interested, there's my email, and I'm one of a number of program officers at NSF. So feel free to contact me, and you could tell me what your idea is, and then if I'm not the right guy to talk to, I could refer you to a relevant program officer. So you can look up the grant announcement or program solicitation for all these programs at the website listed there. And the way that, one relatively painless way to get started, you may want to have an initial brief phone call with a program officer to find out if you think you've identified the correct program to apply to, or just briefly describe your idea, and a program officer can help you find the best home for your project. And then we invite you to send us a 1 or 2 page summary. It's not required, but if you send us a 1 or 2 page summary or a project, we can give you very targeted feedback on your project. And then it would be your job to create an excellent proposal so that you could be funded. And just to point out, I recently helped organize, it was last December, a meeting of the principal investigators or project directors of the maker-funded projects that had been funded by EHR, and there were over 50 project directors who were invited, and about that many attended. And the reason I say that is just to point out that NSF welcomes proposals from maker projects. And then just one final thing, if you think you have an interesting project, but you don't think that, you're not sure if you could if it's relevant or if it could be funded by NSF, well, don't answer the question for yourself and decide for yourself that you don't think it fits. Talk to a program officer and get some feedback. You may find that it's highly relevant, and it's not that NSF proposals are a simple exercise. It requires months of work, and the funding rate is could be higher. That would be nice. But many people, submit a proposal, and obviously some are successful. If you're not successful, well, you're invited to revise your proposal and resubmit it if you believe you can remedy some of the weaknesses that might have been identified in the review process. And just to point out that NSF uses a peer review process, so we invite experts on the particular focus of proposals to write written reviews for proposals and to convene in review panels to discuss proposals. So your proposal isn't just, we don't just internally make the decision. We rely heavily on the review process and on the insights of the outside reviewers. If you are interested in being a reviewer, please, I invite you to send me like a 1 or 2 page, call it a bio sketch or a brief resume, and just your interest in, if you have an interest in a particular program or just in general, send me your information, and if we have a review panel where your expertise would be useful, then we will try to get you on a review panel. So there you go. So I'm sorry I had to rip through it so quickly, but I would encourage you to look at NSF at the NSF websites and to look up those particular programs. And please email me if you'd like any further information about a particular program, or if you'd like just some general information about how to put together a successful proposal. I will respond.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob, for just providing such a concise, I know it wasn't a ton of time, but comprehensive overview of NSF, and in particular, 4 of the programs within your directorate that might be really great opportunities for the organizations and individuals that have been participating in Make for All. So right now we've got some time for questions. We've got about 10 minutes for questions and discussion. So Megan's going to help us out with that. There's a couple of different ways that you can, if you have a question, just signal to us. On your dashboard of the GoToWebinar, you'll see there's a little hand raising tool. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand using that hand raise button, and we'll unmute you so you can ask your question. And then the other option is also the chat box. If you want to type out your question or idea or thought, feel free to share that. Megan, do we have any questions teed up, or anyone that has a question right now?
Not quite yet, that I see so far.
Okay, not a problem. Well, I actually have, I know that Christy and Jacob actually had one particular question around ideas that folks might have related to helpful approaches to tracking who has downloaded and or utilized the curriculum, the open source curriculum that they've developed from the Columbia Gorge STEM Hub maker programming. Does anybody have any ideas around that? I don't know if others have, more broadly shared maker-centered learning curriculum or projects on their own sites and have developed ways to track who else has been using their projects more broadly. Maybe we'll let folks ruminate on that. But if the other question that popped up as folks were talking and presenting, I know Nick, you provided just a really nice overview of the leadership framework for maker education and maker-centered learning. I was kind of curious if you had an example of an organization or school or community that has actively been using the framework, and just sharing a little bit about how using that framework has really changed the way they've integrated maker-centered learning into the work that they've been doing.
Sure. So I actually just led a cohort of 10 schools in the Pittsburgh region. Can you hear me okay? I just heard something go off.
Yep, we can hear you great.
Okay, great. 10 schools in the Pittsburgh region, and all of our work was rooted in the use of that maturity matrix and the corresponding framework. We frequently use the contents of that of the framework, and both the stuff that we've developed internally at Digital Promise, and then the resources that are from external partners as well, to help people understand the different concepts and tasks that need to happen as you're developing a program. So the 10 schools in our cohort They self-assessed themselves at the beginning of the year. They used a roadmap to kind of decide we want to be we're in beginning with curricular integration right now, and we want to move to embedded. Well, that's a really lofty goal. So like, let's chunk that and how do we move from beginning to the exploring column in the framework in the matrix. So then using the resources that we had there over the course of the year, they were able to kind of move the needle with where they were in their different sections of the framework.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that example. For folks who were interested in the work that our Chattanooga colleagues have been doing, Grant and Michael, I was kind of curious. I know you highlighted that the new Global Center for Digital Innovation is actually going to be a collaboration between Chat State and Hancock County Schools. And I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the importance of collaborating with a local college in the community and why you decided to, formally have the district partner with Chat State on creating this center.
Came from a visit.
Oh, you guys sound like you're underwater again.
Okay, just one more time. How's that?
Yes, that's better.
So this was for the DCBI, for this Global Center, came about from a site visit that we did with Hamilton County Schools, PEF, and
you guys are really faint. I'm not sure if you can turn up your volume at all.
Let's see here.
That's better.
Okay,
I think it's.
I'll just speak louder. So the project came from a site visit we did to Lorain Community College outside of Cleveland, Ohio, where it's my understanding it's the first Fab Lab not on MIT's campus. And when we were there, what we discovered was some really interesting implications of bringing Fab Labs and digital fabrication to post-secondary arena. We don't have that currently in a formal space in our region, but we had taken a colleague from Chattanooga State, our local community college, with us on that visit. What became really evident was that we had a deficiency locally in the post-secondary opportunities for digital fabrication, but we had a wealth of opportunity with what we were already building in the K-12 arena, such that the Lorain Community College folks were, in their words, salivating over the pipeline that we were sort of spilling out with graduates. We have actively about 12,000 students currently who have access to digital fabrication tools every day in these labs, and plans to expand that to the entire 45,000 student district. So building this on the campus became a natural sort of byproduct of that visit. And I should add, the STEM School Chattanooga is actually co-located. Hamilton County Schools rents floor space from the community college. So STEM School is actually located there on the college campus. So that GCBI is going to be not just collaborative in terms of like, conceptual collaboration, but it's actually going to be co-operated by the school district and the community college. They'll have full-time staff working in that space. The school district particularly focusing on how they leverage access to this 15,000 square foot, top of the line innovation center. How do they leverage that for a wide range of initiatives, from teacher training to elementary and middle school age field trips, to giving high school students capstone experiences where they can get early post-secondary credit by performing tasks and the capstone projects in conjunction with faculty at the community college there. So it's going to be able to really serve a broad range, specifically in the K-12 context. Then the community college is working on, they're probably 2 years out from this being articulated, but they're working on developing a digital fabrication associate's degree that will be available through that space as well. And then the third prong of that is opening it up to the community. So we can then have Fab Labs operating in their true capacity, where it's truly serving as a hub to connect from elementary students through college fully into community partners who need access to that space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that that additional information, Michael. I know we're a few minutes over. It's 5 past, so I just wanted to reiterate and thank you again to the speakers who shared their work and ideas and insights with us today. Real quickly, our next call will be on Tuesday, October 15th. The calls are always on the third Tuesday of every month from 1 to 2 p.m. on 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time, 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the registration link for the next call we'll send out along with a recording of this webinar by early next week, but it's also available on the Make for All website at makeforall.org. If any of you have additional questions around Make for All, please feel free to contact me. And otherwise, thank you so much for participating, and looking forward to chatting with you in October. Thanks, everybody. Take care.